in our Microsoft Personal Shopper agent, and we had just finished configuring our Xbox custom topic that we created under our custom topics. We had created Xbox. And this particular topic, we've been talking a lot about this create generative answers node. And we were able to assign a special site to this node and even custom instructions. And we learned how to capture the response into a variable in the last chapter. And that was awesome. In this chapter, we're going to talk about using classic data further to configure what's called Bing Custom Search. And again, you won't find Bing Custom Search unless you click on the little chevron next to search public websites, and then you'll see search with Bing Custom Search. When you do that, any knowledge source settings that you have in Classic will be discarded, okay? Because now you're saying, I'm going to configure this as Bing Custom Search. So let's back up a little bit. Why would we need Bing Custom Search? Well, as it says here, with Bing Custom Search, you can easily add or block multiple websites using the Bing Custom Search. You may have noticed when you opened up Classic Data that it limited you to 4 public websites and 4 Microsoft internal sites. And so you were constrained in any of those boxes to stay within those constraints. Once you use Bing Custom Search now, you can have more than 4 public websites in order to leverage the Bing Custom Search. Now, this only applies to public websites. This does not have anything to do with your internal websites like SharePoint websites, okay? So let's go and visit and see why we might need this. So we've been using the Microsoft site, and in that site, we had a section for Xbox. And in Xbox, let's say I want to get all my answers for this node from games, only games. I can therefore configure this to be included and everything under games. So I'm going to make an assumption here. If I click on a game, that page is going to exist as a subset of games. So all the games are underneath games in the hierarchy, all right? And when we add sites in our site, it kind of takes everything underneath it, but it doesn't go very many layers deep, okay? So Bing Custom Search helps us grow the path length so that we can say include all pages under this point or include this specific page no matter how many levels deep it is, all right? And just to show you kind of how Copilot Studio counts this, I'm going to copy this path to this particular game. And I'm just going to go to the regular knowledge tab right now. I'm not going to change anything in that node yet. And I'm going to add a knowledge source public website. And you'll notice that if you're going more than 2 levels deep, it won't let you add it, okay? Because it's got a limit of 2 levels deep. And the way it counts this is it doesn't actually count the root. It counts 1, 2. So if I take this out, now it's happy. It's not more than 2 levels deep in the way it's translating this. And so there's 1 level, 2 level root, okay? And so sometimes that ENUS, you could take it out because it is going to redirect to that anyway in the region. You don't need it there, but adding it would make it more than 2 levels deep. So that's why sometimes I will take that out. But with Bing Custom Search, we don't have to worry about that at all. And so let me just leave there and let's go back to our website. And we want to use, when we're answering this question about Xbox, we want to use every page under games, okay? So we've talked to the site content owners and we're sure that all the games fall under games. Again, I will keep repeating, you should have a connection with somebody who owns the way the content is managed so that you could ask these kind of questions and configure the correct way for your objectives. All right. So I'm going to highlight this and copy it to my clipboard, and then I'm going to introduce you to the Bing Custom Search environment. So here, when you want to go to Bing Custom Search, you're going to start outside of Copilot Studio. You're actually going to use this link, www.customsearch.ai, and you will sign in with the same credentials you are using for your agent. And that is really important. Use the same credentials that you are using for your agent to sign into Bing Custom Search. Once you are signed in, you will agree to the terms, and you will have a UI that will help you create instances. Okay, so we're going to create instances. Now, this is the first time this test user has tried it, and so this is a great thing for you to see. This is the first run experience of Bing Custom Search. There's going to be some welcome messages that I suggest you read. Okay, don't think that I'm saying all of this. I won't be saying everything they're saying. But the key to this is that you will learn how to set pages as active, which means they will be used in looking for the answer that will be summarized. You can block a page or a series of pages, and you can pin queries. Today, we're going to use the active to include the game's series of pages for this particular generative AI. Okay, so once you're done reading all of that, you can create your first instance, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it Xbox. I warn you, don't name it Test 1, Test 2, Test 3, because as you grow your number of instances, you have one instance per node. Okay, so you can get out of control if you don't manage this smartly. All right, you get too many instances, you don't remember which one was which, and then when it's time to update, you don't know where to go, and so you end up starting over. So be very organized in how you name these. Decide a naming protocol, name them appropriate to their agent. Okay, and keep your Bing Custom Search sign-on matching your agent sign-on, and you won't have as much confusion. All right. So out of the box, when you name an instance, this is the Xbox instance that I just created. You can see the name up here. It wants to know what are the active URLs for this search experience, because it's going to search for the answer to the user's question using the Bing search index. Remember, we talked about this in Module 0 and in Module 1, that the indexes are very important. If it's not in the index, then it can't give you the answer. All right, so I'm going to put games in here. And notice by default, when you put a URL in, it will automatically include subpages unless it's more than 3 levels deep. Okay, so for instance, if I had went to this game page here, which falls under games. And this is where you really have to make sure you understand the hierarchy of your site so that you know how these subpages work, so that you're sure you're configuring it exactly what you need. So if I want to paste that URL in, I cannot have it include subpages. Doesn't mean I can't have it. Okay, don't let this red text intimidate you. It is just a warning. It is not an error. Okay, it's more of a warning. You cannot include subpages when the entry is deeper than 2 levels. All right, and so I have to change this to no, which means that now that path will be included as something it can use in the answer, but not its subpages. It's too deep for me to reference the subpages. In this case, I don't need this because I've already included all the subpages of games. But where that could be useful, so it's just as easy to remove something as it is to add it by hitting the garbage can when you don't want something. So I'll get rid of that. And now I'm going to move over to the blocked. And then I'm going to paste that in again. I'm going to get that same error. because it's longer than the two sub levels. And so I will take away sub pages and go ahead and add it. So now what I'm saying, and this is pretty self-evident, is for Xbox games, right? For the games, every sub page under that can be used to answer the query for this particular node that we're configuring. However, it will not give me answers from this page because I've said block this page. So there's a lot of uses for this. Think of back in the day when we were in COVID and there were a lot of pages about COVID regulations on our websites. Maybe we haven't had chance to archive that data and we don't want it coming up in our answers. You could actually block those old pages or ask your content team to archive them. But whatever you don't want used in the answer to the question, you can block. And so in this case, I won't get any information about Crowns and Pawn's Kingdom of Deceit, which is a particular game that maybe I don't want this agent to talk about. All right, so that's blocked. But everything else under games is free game, free play. We can use it. All right. Now, once I finish, now I can go on and on and on and on and just have a good time here. Because I don't have that 4 site limit. So I can add as many as I need to in order to make this search experience exactly what I need for answering the questions that are triggered by this topic. Okay, so as soon as I'm done, I'm going to click publish. And when I publish, I will go to the production environment, which you can do in this dialog here, or you can do up here. When you get to production environment, you will have a configuration ID. It is very important to publish to get your configuration ID. Then you copy it to your clipboard and you go back to Copilot Studio. You go to that custom node that you were working in. So we'll open up Xbox. We'll open up this particular generative answers node for this topic. And under classic data, we are going to change this to Bing custom search, discard the other public website, because anytime we use Bing custom search, that negates any public websites that we've added. I want to be very clear about that. This is about public websites, not internal sites. And then I'm going to paste that configuration ID right there. That configuration ID will continue to work as I have configured it in Bing Custom Search. Now, you can probably guess that if I go back here and add another page, let's say I go back to that Xbox instance and I add another URL or I block a URL, then I have to republish. And you'll see the word publish light up over here when you add new things. I have to republish and then it will work. I don't need to copy and paste the configuration ID again. It will just work because I've published that change. But if I make a change and I do not publish it, then it just disappears. It goes off into Never Land. Okay? So make sure you're keeping track of that you've published your change. There is one more thing you have to do, just to make sure that it's only using that particular configuration. And that is when you go into your knowledge sources, which is right above classic, go ahead and select search only selected sources, but don't check anything. This will make sure it does not defer back to your list of knowledge sources. All right. I have tested this and sometimes I have to do this. And so I think it's a best practice. Just click on the knowledge sources, select search only selected sources, but don't select anything. Make sure that there's no checkboxes, which will force it to only use this. All right, so I'm going to say save. And then I can close this. I can double check that this has Bing Custom Search as the data source. And then let's trigger Xbox again. And if you notice, when it triggers, you also see not only the left panel going to the right topic, but also which parts of the topic are completed and done, right? By these little checkers. And you'll see over here on the right, now I had a pretty old question. I should have updated my question to be about games, but I left the question the same, and it came back with a much shorter, much more succinct list because it could only get it from the games area of the site. So if you look at the lower left of my screen, kind of shaded over there on the bottom left, you can see that the path it's taking is the path that we allowed the Bing custom search configuration to take. And that's why it couldn't give me all that other detail that was on other pages in the site. So keep in mind that sometimes you want to use this in order to target a set of pages. Usually you do try and do it by subpages. You try to go back to the highest level subpage and then include the subpages. But when you can't, you may add URLs one at a time, no matter how deep they are. You just would say no subpages and they would be included. And this gives you an opportunity to have more than 4. But if there's any pages you want to block, the same story applies. I can block under store, for instance, and say nothing under store should be used. So I can do that kind of thing. The pend is about common queries. So I can test this out over here and say, I don't know, new games. Again, I didn't do enough research on this site. But here we have all these games. And if I think new games is going to be a common query, people are looking for new games, so they might type, what are the new games? I just might type the whole query and then search. And then I kind of decide, okay, which answer is what we'd like to promote, and I can pin that to the top. Okay, so I can do that kind of thing so that these queries will execute a little bit faster because the most common ones are listed under pinned. And we will give you some documentation so you can understand things like query match conditions and how these are moderated and such, because you do have some more options that I didn't discuss in this chapter. But this is definitely one of my favorite features. Always remember, you change anything, republish. Just make that a natural habit to republish. You do not have to change the configuration ID number, but you do have to remember to publish. So I think this is an excellent tool. And my call to action to you today is to configure a topic in your agent, whether it's the Microsoft agent or your own, to target a page and exclude a page from your website, and then test it to make sure it's working. I look forward to talking to you further in the next chapter. This is one of my favorite features, though. Enjoy.